Before I begin, I'd like to thank Justin Farrell and Lauren Ashbrook for the invitation. It's been a long time in making, and it's so wonderful to actually be here. Let me also say that it's really the honor of my life to give this talk here to the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences in this wonderful venue at the Vatican, and also to be joined by colleagues whose work has meant so much to me in studying post-truth and in my philosophy over the years. This is also a great honor to be in this audience. Thank you all. In 2017, I wrote a book called Post-Truth, in which I explored the roots of this concept, which I define as the political subordination of reality. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what post-truth is. Some people seem to think it's a claim that truth no longer matters. And of course, that would be wrong, because just look at how many people we know who are deeply concerned about truth. But I think that is a ridiculous misconception of what post-truth means. Because to say that we live in a post-truth era is not to say that truth doesn't matter. It's to say that truth is in danger, that truth does matter, but it is being undermined by those who have found that it serves their interests better for some truths to be in doubt. We've seen plenty of examples of this over the last several years. The easiest to appreciate are the ones that came out of the Trump administration in the United States. Trump did not invent post-truth, but he brought it to a high art form. He started with the claim that there were more people at his inauguration than were at Obama's, even though photographic evidence made it clear that this wasn't the case. 4 years later, just as he was about to leave power, Trump bookended this with the claim that the 2020 election was stolen, which culminated in a mob assault on the US Capitol to try to overturn the will of the American voters. That is the political subordination of reality. If you don't like the truth, challenge it. Pretend it's not the case. Provide a counter narrative. You don't need to prove anything or even provide any evidence. Just create enough doubt that your supporters have something to hang their hats on. It's important here to draw a distinction, though, between lying and post-truth. When you outright lie, you're of course doing a very bad thing, because you're trying to mislead someone into believing that a false thing is true. We often think that because it's intentional, a lie is the worst sort of assault on truth that there can possibly be, but it's not. When you lie, you're at least showing enough respect for the person you're lying to that you want them to believe what you're saying. You're trying to convince them, or rather, you're trying to steal their cognitive consent, which isn't much respect, but it's at least some as compared to what happens with post-truth. The best way to understand post-truth, I believe, is as a tool in the authoritarian's toolkit. The great Holocaust historian Hannah Arendt understood well the nexus between undermining truth and totalitarian rule. If you control the flow of information, you can control the population. You needn't convince anyone. Real power doesn't need your cognitive consent. Propaganda is essentially ridiculous as a means of persuasion, but it at least shows you who's boss. And it provides just enough room for doubt that one can become despondent and may wonder whether it's ever really possible to know the truth outside a political context. As Arendt put it, quote, "The ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, true and false, no longer exists," end quote. Another great contemporary Holocaust historian, Timothy Snyder from Yale, said it even more briefly in his wonderful book on tyranny. Post-truth is pre-fascism. The point of subordinating reality is that it serves the authoritarian's goal. Now, where does all this come from, and how can we understand it? Because if we can understand it, maybe we can understand better how to fight it. In my book, and here today, I'm going to argue that the best possible explanation of post-truth is to see it as the natural result of 60 years of unchecked science denial. In Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway's brilliant book, Merchants of Doubt, they demonstrate that modern science denial started with the tobacco companies in the 1950s, who were despondent over a forthcoming study that would demonstrate an all but causal link between cigarette smoking and lung cancer. So what did they do? They hired a public relations expert who told them to fight the science. So that's what they did, not through evidence and argument, but through disinformation, through public relations, through propaganda. They took out full-page newspaper ads. They conducted bogus research conducted at the forerunner to the American Tobacco Institute. Their job was to create enough doubt in the public's mind that the tobacco companies could continue selling their product for the next 60 years using the mantra, the link between cigarette smoking and cancer has never been conclusively established. Well, according to the problem of induction, the necessary link between any two empirical facts has never been proven. David Hume must have been spinning in his grave. They were quoting him accurately, but of course, the point is made. Oreskes and Conway go on to show that the success of this campaign created a blueprint for all modern science denial over the ensuing decades about acid rain, the ozone hole, climate change, anti-vax, and I think that it extends right up to today's COVID denial, which we're suffering from quite a bit in the United States right now. And it's my contention that it extends all the way to post-truth, to fighting the facts not just about science, but about any reality that you care to choose. If you were a would-be authoritarian and you looked out over 60 or 70 years of science denial, you might ask, if they can do that about scientific facts, why not about any facts? What about the path of a hurricane? Or whether a deadly virus will disappear like a miracle? Or whether the Capitol insurrectionists were actually Antifa in disguise? I believe that science denial is the taproot of post-truth. The plan that was created by those tobacco executives all those years ago has now metastasized to all topics where someone's economic, political, or ideological interests are served by undermining reality. Let me boil it down a little bit further for you. If you want to understand post-truth, I think that you have to start with the study of science denial. You should start with the work of John Cook and Stephen Lewandowski. Their important work on the 5 tropes of science denialist reasoning: cherry-picking evidence, belief in conspiracy theories, illogical reasoning, reliance on fake experts, and my favorite, insistence that science has to be perfect in offering proof and certainty, which reveals a grave misunderstanding of how science actually works. It's not Euclidean geometry or deductive logic. Then notice how well this kind of reasoning, the flawed reasoning based on the 5 tropes, also applies to the rejection of facts in so much of today's contemporary American politics. It is the same type of reasoning. I think that one should also study the groundbreaking paper by Cornelia Batch and Philip Schmid in Nature Human Behavior in 2019, which showed how these 5 tropes can form the backbone for an effective strategy for changing the minds of science deniers by debunking their beliefs. Various other techniques are explored in this paper as well, but the point is this: there is no backfire effect. We cannot make it worse by talking to science deniers, though we have to do it in the right way. We already have the tools at our disposal to fight back against misinformation and disinformation. Finally, I think that we have to study the psychological research which suggests that denialist beliefs are not actually about ideology, but identity. They're about which team you're on. Thus, the way to reach someone and change their mind is not to approach them with facts to cram down their throat, but with empathy and respect to help them see that there is room for them on the side of reality and reason. After I wrote Post-Truth, I began a journey to put all of this into action by going out to talk with science deniers face to face. I wanted to see what worked best and how to actually reach them. So I started with the Flat Earth International Conference in Denver, Colorado in November 2018. I wanted to choose something quite difficult, and I found it. There I faced the worst science deniers on the planet, the belly of the beast. Of course, they were irrational. They're the kind of science deniers that even other science deniers laugh at. But their reasoning strategy was virtually identical to that used by anti-vaxxers, climate deniers, and the rest. And over time, I realized something else too, which is that their reasoning techniques were eerily similar to those being used by post-truthers in what I was seeing daily on television coming out of American politics. Belief in conspiracy theories, reliance on fake experts, illogical reasoning, it was all there. After 2 days, I left the Flat Earth Conference convinced that even though they were delusional, the flat earthers were not actually dangerous. But after the assault on the US Capitol on January 6, 2021, I changed my mind. Science denial is not just the denial of any one specific scientific fact or theory. It's a challenge to the process by which all scientific truths are tested and verified. It is a challenge to our ability to use reason to know reality. The denial of scientific truth leads to the political subordination of reality, I believe, quite directly. The creation of doubt about whether cigarette smoking causes lung cancer culminated in the assault on the US Capitol. That is the danger of post-truth.